Be at the clock. Hello, I'm Christine Schiavone, and our show is Spiritual Exploration. Tonight, I have a guest with me who you all, I'm sure, know because she's been with me so many times, Blanca Greenberg, also known as Lavanya. How you doing, Blanca?
God bless. Christine, beautiful. Thank you again for always having me in your home and
Always
your show.
my pleasure.
Thank you. How are you?
You just have, I'm good, thank you. How you doing?
Good.
You always have so many interesting subjects, and I know that this isn't even the tip of the iceberg to have you talking about things, but tonight we're going to talk about soul retrieval, unveiling your wholeness.
Yes.
Now, when we talked on the phone, and I said, well, what should we talk about this time that you're going to be a guest on the show? And we discussed a couple of subjects, and we both decided that soul retrieval was a good one to come out with at this point in time. Now, what does that mean when you say soul retrieval? Does that mean that people's souls are lost and have to be retrieved, or what?
Well, you know what? From a shamanistic point of view, it means that a soul can suffer from what we call fragmentation. And in order for even the audience to begin to, encompass and understand that, they have to be open-minded to the fact that we can have reincarnations. Although soul retrievals can actually happen also in a current life. But in my experience, and in most experiences regarding soul retrievals, it is an experience where a soul experiences a traumatic event, a very emotionally painful event, so much so that they can actually leave what we call fragmentations in that lifetime, in that energetic field. And so again, we need to expand, our perception in order to just explore the subject tonight, because it is a very real experience, and one that I've actually seen, amazing and transformational for many people who go through life sort of feeling a void, an emptiness, or suffering from a host of confusion. Or we made a list actually of some of the dispositions that we'll discuss in a little bit that people can display, but I'm going to just pick one out. The busy bee, somebody who is compulsively always busy, and it's almost like an obsession. They can't stop.
They can't stop going and going and going. They don't take a rest. They don't stop to breathe. They don't stop to smell the roses.
They can't stop for anything.
Wow.
It's a constant.
Like a workaholic or something?
We can say like a workaholic, but a workaholic is someone who is just dedicated to work. The busy bee is somebody who can't be with themselves. Okay, who can't stop and enjoy their presence or the moment of now. And so really, it's someone who has to constantly be externally busy. They can't stand to be with themselves. You know how
So they don't like their own company, so they stay busy so they don't have to think about it?
Exactly, and one of the reasons why they can't be with themselves is because they don't feel whole. There's something that prevents them.
Something missing from their life?
Something missing, and or something traumatic that they just, that they know that if they go into that still place, they may actually have a memory. And of course, this all happens subconsciously. It's not like the person has an awareness that, oh boy, if I sit down, I'm gonna have. But the disposition of the person is then that they're constantly busy. So much so that it becomes, a problem in every part of their lives. They just can't stop. They're constantly running.
Now, that comes from someone who has had a traumatic experience either in this life or a previous life?
Well, I want to say to the audience that, we don't want to label anybody. So, if anybody is viewing the show today, we're presenting it because Soul Retrieval is a huge venue, a spiritual venue by which we can help people if they've suffered from what, a soul fragmentation. But it doesn't mean that everybody who's busy, or
Right.
any other of the dispositions, that, oh my God, you know,
I mean,
Lavanya
I'm
is
pretty
saying
busy myself, actually.
exactly. We're talking about extremes, and
Yeah.
so we want to make that clear from the beginning of the show. And it's not only an extreme, but the real key for someone to explore if perhaps the soul retrieval is for them is that whatever it is that they're being, it's not enjoyable. You know?
Oh, I see.
They feel that they wish that they can stop, you know? So a busy bee just really doesn't want to be busy, you know? They wish that they can stop.
But they can't.
One of the other dispositions is a procrastinator. You know, we can almost
Puts
all
everything off
say,
until tomorrow.
you know, that we suffer to one degree of or another of procrastination. But the individual who may want to consider a soul retrieval is someone who is extremely procrastinating in every area of their lives. So much so that it's cost them many things. You know,
Where it starts
jobs,
to interfere
relationships.
with your life, yeah.
Exactly. And it's someone, almost we could say, and God bless, you know, like someone who's addicted or someone, you know, who has a compulsion. You know, an individual like that is not really enjoying having a compulsion or addiction. They're in a lot of pain. And they wish that they could stop. But something greater than themselves is keeping them in this state.
All right, well, let's go over this list that you
Yes.
made. There's 14 things on the list. And then we'll talk about how do you retrieve the soul of a person who is like any of these things. Okay. You're talking about the busy bee, the person's always busy. The dead soul walking. Mm-hmm. Now, that's a person
That is a person who, you know, the dead soul walking, someone who is extremely despondent. You know, that when you actually look at them, you know, you could actually...
They're depressed?
Beyond depression. We're not talking about just somebody who's depressed. We're talking about somebody who's acutely depressed, someone who is barely despondent, you know, who is forced to a degree to, you know, be introverted, doesn't go out, doesn't associate with anyone, doesn't socialize.
Almost autistic.
Well, we don't want to confuse, you know, autistic is a beautiful, you know, is a beautiful person who's just special, at least in my professional opinion.
Right.
But they still can interact, an autistic person, you see.
But a person who's a dead soul walking.
A dead soul walking, like I said, it's somebody who could sit in a corner and almost just look dead, you know. If you try to speak to them, they could barely get their words out. And I mean, these are not individuals that we see every day.
I was just thinking that.
You know,
I was saying to myself, we don't really come
thank
across
God
people like this all
that
the
we
time.
don't see them every day. You know, I've had, you know...
a few come to you?
Yes. You know, and it takes a lot of compassion, actually, to see someone like this because they're so despondent.
Yeah, yeah.
That they
Is there any way to break them out of it, though?
They can, and that's what a soul retrieval is.
All right.
You know,
so then we'll get into how that happens. But now there's the compulsive addict.
Yes, and you know what? Before we even go there, because you just triggered something, a dead soul walking is a classic example of someone that may have lost the fragmentation of their soul right here in this lifetime. And how that happens it could happen, is someone who's been or is being acutely abused.
Oh, boy.
Okay, physically, verbally, emotionally. And that soul is in so much pain that they begin to, you know, just withdraw to an extreme degree. Mm-hmm. So much so that at one point or another, one of these episodes of abuse or violence can be occurring, and energetically, they can just shut down to a point where there's where the soul fragmentation happens, you know. So in other words, you know, we reenact right now, you and I'm beating you up, you know, this has happened 100 times, and at one moment I'm just striking you, and something happens. A part of your soul just shuts down.
Wow.
And from this moment on, you become this dead soul walking where you're just not the same anymore, you know?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I can imagine. Yeah, I do get it.
And so my experience has been that so walking can be from this lifetime, you know,
Really?
can happen.
Now, there's the compulsive addict. That's a person also that has a soul problem?
Again, we don't want to label anybody, you know, because in my spiritual world, there's no absolutes, you know, but I want to say that I would say that 90% of the time for a compulsive addict, yes, that there is some type of soul fragmentation. And why I say that is because the addict, the compulsive addict, doesn't want to be an addict. They're obviously using substance in order to shut down. And again, there we go.
Yeah, yeah.
Or to numb some part of themselves that is in extreme pain.
Yeah, yeah.
And you know, this is so important. This is such an amazing subject because it's so easy to condemn people when we see them suffering from these conditions, you know. Oh, you're such a lazy bum, you know, you're a procrastinator. Oh, you know, why are you so weak that you're an addict, you know?
Yeah.
And we're not really educated to understand that these people are not choosing to make these choices because
they want to.
Because they want to, but that it's life experiences and very traumatic emotional ones that lead them to make these painful choices.
What about the sickly child you have there?
Yeah.
It's a child that's always sick, always getting
I say sickly child, the chapter, you know, I was just inspired to call it a sickly child, but it doesn't only encompass the child, it could evolve to the sickly adult. I'm sure we've all met someone who is constantly sick.
You mean like a hypochondriac?
That is a classification. You know, someone who's a hypochondriac should seriously consider, you know, if nothing else has helped, to consider a soul retrieval. Really? Because again, we have classifications in the allopathic environment in the medical field, and then we're talking about shamanistic work, spiritual work. You know, so if we almost brought them together, we would see that they're the same dynamic, you know, just that in the medical arena, we would call it a hypochondriac. And I'm saying the sickly child is someone who probably lost an aspect of their soul somewhere.
Now, these are all people that are crying for help.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
The unfocused soul. I guess there's somebody that's scattered. Maybe they label ADD as something like that.
Yes. And you know what? That's very common today. So I hope that the viewers who are watching are open. You know, there's no obligation here, but to just explore. And why that particular area is so important is because these children today are so easily being labeled ADD. You know what?
True.
ADD, ODD.
I know.
You know what? We're going to start making it up. DDD and PPP. You know,
right.
Just put 3 initials on it, and you know what? You have a disease, a condition.
Right.
You're disabled. You are limited.
Yeah.
And what a tragedy it is because, you know, these children go on to become adults and they're labeled.
Yeah.
They don't fit in, you know, they're forced to not fit into society because of these labels. I know I've worked with so many children that are in challenging, you know, challenged classes in schools that really don't belong there. You know, where there's children that are really mentally challenged. But because these children have been labeled with ODD and ADD, they just throw them all in this class. And something that could have been worked on now becomes an acute condition because the child gives up.
And they start putting them all on all kinds of hard medications.
Oh, of course. Well, that's right. Yet another, you know.
Right.
So again, the sickly child. Is that where we were at? Yes.
We were at the unfocused soul.
Oh, the unfocused. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Someone who's very scattered, who cannot focus,
Can't pay attention.
who cannot pay attention.
comprehend.
And again, we're talking about acute conditions, because we all, if we're stressed, if
Oh,
we're
at one time or
tired.
another, we're all of these people.
Yeah,
At one time or another.
exactly.
But we're just not constantly.
Exactly, right.
You know?
And that's what we're talking about today. Someone who is acutely, we're inviting viewers for anyone or someone that you may know who is acutely plagued
Right.
by any of
Right,
these,
all of these things. What about the martyr?
dispositions.
A person that's always, woe is me, and
Someone who
everybody
feels
does things to me.
extremely victimized. That the whole world, and by the way, again, we're talking about extremes, so it's not just the person who's saying, oh, my parents are against me, my siblings are against me. We're talking about someone that if it rains,
They think that
they think that it was meant, for them to suffer. That if the government makes a decision,
it's
that it
against
was,
them.
oh my God, this is happening to me.
Right. And only me.
Right. And God bless, we can, when we hear these extremities, we could say, it is, we couldn't say it's almost comical, but I really want to stress how painful these experiences can be for these
They're
people
very
because
real for
they're
these
real,
people.
exactly.
Right. They're very real for them.
They're very real for these individuals.
You got the perfectionist. Somebody who everything has to be just so, and that's it, and they won't accept anything less.
Yes, and again, there's many of us who suffer from perfectionism. The perfectionist who can benefit from a soul retrieval, at least exploring it, is someone who would go through radical measures to be right.
Oh.
Okay, so again, we're talking about extremes here, or pretty much extremes.
It's those long
Sorry
earrings.
about that. Someone who would be capable of hurting someone.
Really?
Or being violent in order to be right.
Wow. You go that far, huh?
Actually, I like to share an example of what acute perfectionism. I worked with a beautiful soul who came to me quite a number of years ago, a professional in her 40s, and she was in dire need of help because she was pulling her hair out, literally. And so when she exposed her scalp to me, she had bald spots in many parts of her head.
Oh my God.
And you can imagine, we're talking about
Now,
very
this is a
horrific
perfectionist
things.
now, or?
She was a perfectionist, yes, and I'll share with you how we got, how we
They
were
came
able
to that conclusion.
I asked her to share with me because it could have been any number of things. It could have been a medical condition or some kind of deficiency in the body. But what she started to share with me was that as a child, she was pushed to the limit to be perfect. Perfect in school, perfect in what she wore, perfect in her demeanor, perfect in her behavior, perfect. And her parents, particularly her father, had insisted that she play the piano.
Oh no.
And although she was drawn to it, it wasn't something that she really wanted to pursue, but she had to play the piano, and she had to play it perfect.
Oh.
And so this became a behavioral pattern for her because it was so, instilled to the point where, she was emotionally abused, physically abused, in order to reach this state of perfectionism. And so what she started to do at a young age, and again, many viewers, God bless, may be able to start seeing, she would, at a young age, at 12 or 13, she started by cutting herself.
Oh boy. Yeah, I've heard of people that cut themselves.
A lot of teenagers do, actually.
Really?
And so, they took it to psychiatrists, therapists, whatever. But anyway, we now take it to 40-something-year-old. And she's an adult, But this behavior now, is so a part of her. And at some point, she left a part of her soul in one of these beatings that she got for not being perfect, that this became now a compulsive behavior, that if she didn't think she was doing something perfect, she had to punish herself.
Oh my God.
Yes. And so what she would do was she would pluck her hair out.
Oh boy.
And it's very painful.
Sure.
And I'm talking about very visible bald spots.
Wow.
So she spends an extreme amount of time punishing herself. So do you see what we're talking about here?
Yeah.
This is very extreme. And
So you're saying that teenagers, a lot of them cut themselves. Do you think that they are in need of a soul retrieval?
Well, I wouldn't say necessarily that I wouldn't rule it out, but I would say that a teenager, anyone who's cutting themselves, is definitely sending us signals.
Oh, sure.
Okay,
There's crying for help of some sort.
There's a cry for help.
Yeah.
And we don't need to get to a place. We're talking about extreme cases here. And why I keep using that word is because somebody has to be acutely suffering for an extended period of time, or something has to be severely traumatic in order for this to take place. So with that said, if we're seeing symptoms such as someone cutting themselves,
there's a good chance.
Well, the cry is to get help before it gets to this point.
Right.
Where, the soul gets to a point that it starts to shut down.
Right.
Where in the future they may need a soul retrieval. And the reason why we need to become educated is because there's still a lot of mystery around spirituality. Never mind soul retrieval, like what the hell is that?
Right.
Yeah. For many, it's voodoo, or God bless. For some, it may be a violation to their religion, to their belief structure.
But it's still there, though. It still exists.
Well, what I'm saying is that yes, and the reason why the show could be so important for viewers today is because if they recognize any of these dispositions, and they get help, hopefully it won't get to a point where that beloved soul will need a soul retrieval in the future.
Well, here you have the helpless soul.
The helpless soul is, there's a lot of the titles that I picked for the book, just really,
Which, if you want to hold up the book to the camera there. This is a book that Blanca wrote about this subject. And you have them on hand, right?
Yes, I do.
Oh, good.
Yes, I do.
All right, well, Blanca's page is at the end of the show if anybody's interested. Anyway, the helpless soul, which we could probably, we could imagine what that is. The reluctant one, reluctant to what?
Reluctant to anything. Someone who is so stubborn and so defiant, that it's impossible to reach them. I can't do this. I'm not gonna do it. I can't walk. I can't read. I can't leave my house. I can't be happy. They can't anything.
Wow.
And those extremes could be to not eat.
Wow.
And in an extreme cases, why I just can't breathe.
Wow.
And so. Somebody who's extremely defiant, and again, we're talking about not just today, once in a while, or if you have a drink, but a constant battle
with this person.
With someone who is.
And what about the regretful one? That person's always full of regret for whatever they do, they regret it?
Yes.
They think that everything they do is the wrong thing?
Everything. Everything. The fact that they were born.
Really?
Actually,
so that's far back.
God bless, and this show is taped, but I just met with someone yesterday, a pained soul, a beautiful woman, in her 40s also, and she was definitely displaying. I'm not sure yet, because it's not like a magical thing, A soul retrieval is something that a shaman has to seriously explore before, before saying, like, yes, this is a
In
candidate.
other words, they have to know really for sure.
Because it's always possible that what the person needs is, counseling work.
Right.
And that we could get them to that place of wholeness.
Yeah.
But anyway, I spent some time with this beautiful, beloved soul yesterday evening, and she was a classic regretful one.
Really?
I don't know why I was born, and everything about me, and I don't even know if it's karma, but no matter what I do, and my life, school, where I lived, my car, every syllable out of her mouth was, what went wrong, how I regret this.
Can't go through life regretting everything.
We shouldn't, but...
So he said, hold it up. Hold up the book.
But, again, these are dispositions of people who can't break out of whatever it is that they're feeling, And again, the cry is, somebody help me, because they don't enjoy being in these... it's almost like a trap.
These are all negative things,
Yes.
To finish it off is the justifier, the overwhelmed soul, the fearful one. All of these people are in some kind of a trap. They're, in some ways, they're not living their lives the way they should be living them, the way they could be living them.
Yes. And again, it's a very painful journey for the soul, for their families, anyone who's a family member.
Right. So tell me, how do you go about retrieving a soul that has had such a trauma in one of their lives, or even in this one, to help that person get over and past all of the negativity?
Well, I could only speak for myself again, because and I want to say for shamans and in general, although I'm not about labels again, so because I wear different hats at the office, before I even consider doing a soul retrieval with someone, I'm going to counsel them,
Okay, so that's
and
the
try
first step.
to see, and counseling them. My endeavor is to see, if I could, if they're reachable, if they're not any of the, to the extreme. If we can work together, if I can help them, in a counseling route of just having them do the healing work, of which you and I have had many shows, forgiveness and, lovingly detachment, releasing. And if I spend, 1 or 2 sessions, and again, I leave that open, sometimes I'll spend 10 minutes with someone and say like, oh my God, like this is a person who's out there, who's very unreachable. But for the most part, I'll give it the benefit of the doubt, because again, we don't need to take someone through a soul retrieval if healing work can bring them to a place of wholeness.
Right. But when you do have to go and when you come to the conclusion that someone needs a soul retrieval, how do you go about doing that?
It's an intense, but not intense for them.